part of the way that you can determine whether, for trading purposes, is to use slope as a measurement of buying or selling pressure. For example, in this case, it looks like we peaked out in buying, and actually we did decline the next day, but it was very slight. You can see that we again peaked here the very next day, but buying pressure remained above that 50% level and remained on a slope higher, but flattened out here. So at this point, you want to take a look at the slope. The slope was flat. That means buying pressure was flat, and that there's opportunity for selling to come into the market. Again, here we have slope that is flat on the selling pressure, which means that selling is starting to dry up at this point, and that buying would come back into the market, and that's exactly what happened. In fact, it came in pretty strong, and the market advanced strongly the very next day until it started flattening out again. So you can see the waves of buying and selling pressure coming into the market. It's quite remarkable, actually. You see the buying here, and then all of a sudden you see a wave of selling coming in the very next day. In fact, it stayed quite persistent. The selling pressure stayed above that 50% level for 3 days in a row, driving the market of a high of 85.73 all the way down to a low of 82.64. Before you can see the buying pressure beginning to flatten out here. It started rising, didn't quite make it though, couldn't get above that 50% mark. And even though this is an indicator for buying and selling pressure in the markets, you can use it as a trading indicator. As I've indicated here, that you can use it when there's a void of buying in the market. If you start to look at when the indicator begins to rise above this 50% mark. This 50% mark is really critical because at that point, the market is basically unchanged. Once it rises above that, the prices should start to follow and rise as well. Here, we saw it rise above the 50% mark right on this bar here. So you could have gone long around 83.15. At that point, you could see that the slope was beginning to slow down here. It was starting to peak, especially once it's above that 75% level. And right in here, you could have covered your long positions at 83.62, so there's a little bit there. Then you begin to see the selling pressure starting to rise, and the market sold off once again, and then you see buying pressure coming in. And that's really what this does, is it measures the buying and selling waves. And you can see that the buying and selling waves are constant. There's no end to them. Now, over the long term, the market will either advance or decline in price terms, depending on your point of view, I guess, it could go up higher or lower. But from my point of view, there is constant flow of either buying or selling pressure. It never ends. The amount of actual price movement, it depends on other factors. For example, selling pressure started to peak out here, but then you can see the slope. The slope was starting to decline here, and right after that, the buying, buyers saw an opportunity and they stepped in. Now, whether you think the market is manipulated or not, this will also help you to determine when large players are coming into the market, because you can see that there was selling pressure on the market. The market declined on this day. This was Friday. And, right at the end of the day, you had a little bit of an uptick, and you can see that the selling pressure, as far as, indicated, started to slope down, which meant that buying pressure was starting to come into the market here. And you can see the upsloping buying indicator here. Another thing that would have tipped you off that buying pressure was starting to come into the market was the fact that the yellow line here was separated a great deal from the number of the internal issues, which is a proprietary indication of whether or not the number of stocks are up or down based on the volume that they're receiving. And this separation here between these two lines is an indicator that the selling pressure is really dissipating very quickly. And that's exactly what happened, and the market decided to go up. We had a couple of days here in which the market was up, but it peaked. You could tell there was a peak here, and then it started slowly declining. So again, slope was a indication here that selling pressure was starting to come back into the market, and you could see the selling pressure starting to peak out here. But then it had it created a double top, and this is one of the most reliable trading indicators. This double top showed that selling peaked, and now we actually had a lower high than this one on this particular bar, which should have given you an opportunity to either cover your shorts or to go long again. And you can see for the most part, buying pressure can remain stable for 3 days, maybe 4 at the most, before selling pressure starts to come into the market. And I'm not sure the reason for that. You guys can speculate on what you think that reason is. But all I know is that you can't make money without prices moving, and you can't, buyers, if there's more buyers than sellers, prices will rise. If there's more sellers than buyers, prices will fall. And that's exactly what this will tell you. On the very next day, you had basically a tug and pull, a tug of war on who's going to win the battle of either buyers or sellers. But you can tell from this is that selling was basically peaking out. Buying probably was going to start to come in. And if you were smart on this particular day, on the first hour of trading, you would have seen that the buying pressure was starting to come in, and it rose above the 50% line, and it gave you a nice run up here before the selling pressure started to take over again. And then the buying pressure stepped right back up again, right into this area here. And at that point, you could have seen that, in fact, the buyers, even though prices were depressed during these 4-hour periods here, buying was quite strong. In fact, there was quite a bit of accumulation going on because it was all, this blue line was above the 50% mark, showing that there was quite a bit of buying coming into the market. And if you were smart, you would have been able to accumulate during these 4 hours here, different kinds of shares. I use it on a 3X and so forth. And then, of course, you could tell that the buyers were in charge. Buying was very, very strong here. It was above that 50% mark, and then prices just absolutely took off. At this point, it looks like, sellers are starting to step into the market, so we're going to keep an eye on it and see what happens, but certainly they are now in charge.